Our movie begins in 1939 in Texas with a young black boy named Bernard who's shining shoes in front of the city's largest bank. Bernard is focused, listening intently to the conversations of the wealthy businessmen and investors whose shoes he's polishing. He begins to jot down everything they say about buying and selling in his notebook because he's curious about how these rich people, most of whom are white, manage to accumulate their money and acquire so many properties. One day, a bank guard spots him eavesdropping on the employees through the window and writing in his notebook. The guard grabs him and yells, thinking Bernard is spying for someone and relaying information, but Bernard runs and manages to escape. When his father learns what happened, he is terrified for him, warning him that the white people might kill him if they find out he's spying on them. He strictly forbids him from doing it again. Bernard tries to convince him that he's doing this because he wants to be rich like them. When his father looks at the notebook, he's impressed by Bernard's talent, way of thinking, and calculations. However, he tells Bernard it's nearly impossible for him to achieve his dream because he isn't white, and white people don't allow black people to become rich. But Bernard is confident he'll achieve his dream, saying he can do it if he moves from Texas to another city. Years pass, and Bernard grows up, gets married, and has a son. We see him moving his family to California in 1954. He temporarily stays at the house of his wife's uncle, Deacon, who offers to help him apply for a job at an airline company, promising to get him an interview. But Bernard says he came to California to start a career in real estate. Deacon scoffs, laughs loudly, and tells Eunice, Bernard's wife, that he didn't know she married a millionaire. Eunice explains that they've saved up a sum of money to start their project, buying a property and renting it out. Deacon provokes Bernard further, suggesting he might lose all his savings and won't even be able to afford the rent for their current place. Bernard can't tolerate his rudeness and discouraging remarks any longer, so he excuses himself and leaves. Eunice follows him, assuring him that she's confident he's a genius and will change their lives, and that they should leave her uncle's place quickly. Bernard then begins searching for every property for sale in the city, learning their prices and talking to the owners. He eventually finds a building with a suitable price for the amount of money he has, but it needs a lot of repairs. He decides to buy it, but he faces a problem. After buying it, he won't have money left to renovate it and cover the repair costs for the apartments. His wife, Eunice, offers to introduce him to an investor. She takes him to meet Joe, a wealthy black man. However, when Bernard talks to him, he feels uncomfortable and finds Joe reckless and irresponsible because he constantly jokes around. Bernard feels he can't trust him or go into a partnership with him. He leaves, upset, telling Eunice he'll never partner with him. The only remaining solution is to go to Parker, the building's owner, and try to negotiate a lower price so he can save some money for the renovations. Bernard goes and speaks with Parker, trying to convince him to reduce the asking price. Bernard explains that if he can fix up the building, the tenants will pay more rent, and then he'll pay Parker the rest of the money he owes. Parker isn't convinced, saying the tenants will never pay more than they already do. Bernard clarifies his vision, saying they will change the class of people they rent to. They will lease to a higher class, like lawyers and doctors who want to improve their living standards and reside in better places, and those people won't object to paying more since it suits their income. Bernard tells him that if he agrees, it will be a joint investment, and they will both profit. Although Parker is impressed by his enthusiasm and thinking, he doesn't agree because he has a better offer from someone else for a larger sum, and he'll receive the full amount immediately. Bernard still doesn't give up. He decides to go to the bank where Parker is one of the most important clients to request a loan. However, the employees there treat him with racism due to his skin color and refuse to let him meet Rod, the bank manager. A female employee lies to him, saying Rod isn't in. Bernard leaves the bank but waits outside until Rod finishes work so he can talk to him. When Rod sees him, Bernard tells him he couldn't meet him inside for the reason they both know, and that's why he had to wait to ask him to approve a loan to buy the property from Parker. That night, Bernard is surprised when Parker calls him, saying the bank manager spoke to him about Bernard's request. Despite the fact that it's against the rules for Bernard to use his name without his knowledge, Rod agrees and tells Bernard to meet him at the bank in the morning to sign the contract and get the loan. He says the only thing that made him agree was Bernard's persistence in buying the building, which meant he was confident in his idea and its profitability. That's why he called the bank and told them to give Bernard the loan, and that he would be his guarantor. Bernard is shocked and can't believe it, as he's finally taking the first step towards his dream. He goes out with Eunice to celebrate. There, Bernard meets Joe, the wealthy black man, who tells him he knows Bernard is ambitious and smart. Joe tells him to come to him if he ever needs help because he likes seeing people like them succeed. He also warns him about Parker. If Bernard doesn't keep his promise and rent out the building quickly, Parker will surely hurt him. Bernard is bothered by this thought and starts reflecting on it. He wastes no time and immediately begins renovating the building with the help of Eunice's cousin and friend, Matt. Bernard agrees to pay them for their work. One of the tenants sees them and tells Bernard to inform Parker that she won't pay any extra rent. Bernard tells her he bought the building from Parker, but she doesn't believe him, saying the building is only for white people and someone like him couldn't possibly afford to buy it. She calls the police on him. When they arrive, Bernard gives them a copy of the papers proving he owns the building. Yet, even the police treat him with racism, telling him to deal with his neighbors nicely, and then they leave. After a while, Bernard moves his family and takes an apartment in the building, which upsets the existing tenants who don't want him as their neighbor. Over time, Bernard manages to rent out all the vacant apartments in the building and quickly pays back all of Parker's money, proving his success to everyone. This impresses Parker even more, and he offers to partner with Bernard to invest together in real estate and split the profits equally. The only condition is that Bernard's role is to speak with clients only on the phone, and when signing contracts, Parker will be the face and attend all agreements because people don't like dealing with Bernard and treat him with prejudice and racism. They would both profit this way. Without hesitation, Bernard agrees. They start buying old properties, renovating them, investing in them, and renting them out until Bernard becomes a partner with Parker in 12 properties. Their capital grows, and Bernard buys a large house for his family and moves them in. When he shows it to Eunice, she likes it but thinks he's renting it. When she finds out he bought it and put it in her name, she's overjoyed, recognizing his appreciation for her encouragement and support when he had no money. However, an unexpected event occurs that changes all of Bernard's calculations. He learns that Parker has died, and his wife wants to cancel their partnership. She offers to buy his share for a very small amount, taking advantage of the fact that Bernard's name is not on any of the contracts between him and Parker, as per their agreement. Bernard is shocked by what is happening and tries to convince her to continue the partnership instead of her late husband, but she refuses, telling him she doesn't like dealing with black people. She advises him to accept the amount she offered before she files a lawsuit where he won't be able to prove his rights and will end up with nothing. When Bernard seeks legal advice, his lawyer tells him the only solution is to have a witness to the partnership to prove his right in court. Bernard remembers Rod, the bank manager who gave him the loan and was aware of all the work between him and Parker. But when he goes to the bank, Rod refuses to meet him. Bernard realizes that Rod won't testify for him and will side with Parker's wife, who is a client of his bank. Bernard gets an idea. If he can buy the building the bank is in, then the bank won't be able to refuse to give him a loan, and he will be a client just like Parker's wife. He remembers Joe, whom Eunice introduced him to as a potential partner, but whom he had rejected. He decides to go to Joe and present his idea. Bernard goes to Joe, tells him about the trouble he's in, and convinces him to partner up and buy the bank building. Joe is impressed by his enthusiasm and tentatively agrees, but tells him they won't agree to sell them the building because they are black. Bernard tells him he accounted for that and has a solution. They will agree with Matt, the construction worker who works with him on renovating the buildings, to be their front since he's white. They go and meet Matt, who agrees, but Joe is not convinced and tells Bernard that Matt is cowardly and won't be able to do what they need. Bernard reassures him, saying they will train him in everything, change his look and clothes, and most importantly, he trusts him. Bernard teaches him how to calculate quickly and how to convince people to buy at any price he wants. They also teach him how to play golf and dress well until he is ready. Before he meets the building owner, Bernard gathers information about him and the building, which is the tallest in the city. Joe finds out all the places the owner frequents and arranges a meeting for Matt with him at the club he belongs to so they can get acquainted. Matt meets the building owner several times at the club and plays golf with him. One time, after they become more familiar, he decides to propose buying the building from him. Bernard tells Matt how to convince him and quickly calculate everything in front of him so he believes him and trusts him. But Matt tells them it's impossible for him to calculate all that, so he's forced to memorize the numbers. Matt meets the building owner and easily manages to convince him using Bernard's method, and the owner agrees to sell it to him. Bernard is thus able to own the building. Bernard and Joe introduce themselves to the tenants as Matt's partners. Over time, their partnership develops. They take loans, buy many buildings, and rent them out. After a while, Bernard returns to Texas and meets his father, who tells him he's proud of what he's achieved. The next day, Bernard takes his son and they go out to show him the city where his father was born. Bernard stops in front of the bank where he used to shine shoes as a child. There, he sees a boy sitting in the same spot, doing the same job. Bernard asks him how much it costs, and the boy's answer shocks him. He says he only shines shoes for white people. Bernard realizes then that Texas hasn't changed after all these years and that racism is still present, even in a small child. Bernard makes an important decision. He will buy the bank in front of which he used to work. He goes to Joe to convince him, saying he wants to buy this particular bank to prove to himself and many people in Texas that black people, just like white people, can succeed and become wealthy. He also believes he can then help many black people by giving them loans. Joe is initially reluctant because the situation in Texas is different from California, and they could face many problems. Bernard convinces him that they will have Matt help them, as they did before, and they will pay him more money, so he agrees. They convince Matt to go to Texas and pretend to be their partner. He manages to convince the bank owner to partner with them, and they buy 80% of the bank, with the remaining 20% belonging to Robert, the bank owner's son. Bernard is overjoyed. He starts having Matt approve loans for black families so they can start projects and improve their income and lives. This is the first time a Texas bank has approved a loan for a black person, when they previously weren't even allowed to enter the bank as customers, unless they were servants or drivers for white people. Over time, Robert, the bank owner's son, begins to suspect Matt because of the large increase in the number of loans he's giving out. When he monitors Matt, he sees him constantly meeting Bernard and Joe and discovers that they are the real owners of the bank, and Matt is just a front for them. Robert goes to confront them at their meeting place, very upset about what they did. He tells them they deceived him by not telling the truth from the start. He informs them that many clients have filed complaints against them because of the loans they're giving to black people. A committee of supervisors will arrive in a month to investigate the matter, and if they discover the truth, the white clients will withdraw, and the bank will lose money and go bankrupt. He leaves, letting them figure out a solution to the problem they created. Bernard says they must stop giving loans to black people during this period until they figure out a solution. Matt suggests they buy a new bank and transfer all the black clients who took loans there until the inspection is over, in which case the committee won't find anything. Bernard and Joe are not enthusiastic about the idea because they don't have time to manage the new bank. Matt takes advantage of the situation and tells them to make him an actual partner in the new bank. Bernard refuses, saying it's difficult because Matt doesn't have the experience required to manage the bank, for which they'll pay a large sum of money. Matt threatens that if they don't agree, he will cause trouble for them, withdraw from all the contracts he signed for them, and stop working with them. Joe gets very angry and blames Bernard because he was suspicious of Matt from the beginning, and Bernard gave him too much trust that he didn't deserve. In the end, they are forced to agree and buy him the new bank. One day, an unexpected inspection occurs at the new bank. Matt informs Bernard that they will arrive in a few hours to examine the loans. Bernard and Joe decide to rush to the bank to help him. To enter the bank, they have to wear janitor uniforms. They do so, but when Eunice sees Bernard, she tells him he's humiliating himself. Bernard tells her he's forced to, and he must help Matt so the new bank doesn't lose money. Joe and Bernard go to the bank. At the same time, the inspection committee arrives and discovers many violations in the loans. Matt can't answer any of the detailed questions they ask him because he doesn't understand and becomes very nervous. He goes to the restroom, where Joe and Bernard are waiting, and asks them to find a way out and help him. Bernard is shocked that Matt made all these mistakes with the loans. Matt tells them he didn't understand and relied on Robert to help him. They realize that Robert intentionally led him to make these mistakes, and it's likely he was the one who informed the inspection committee, as he hates them and wants revenge for what they did. They get angry at Matt for what he did and ask him to focus on Robert at the other bank and try to convince the remaining clients not to cancel their loans. The next day, they learn that Matt sold the losing loans with violations to the Texas bank to save the new bank that is registered in his name. Joe and Bernard quickly go to the Texas bank, unable to believe he did this, and tell him he will close both banks. Matt tells them it's a temporary measure and he will restore everything to how it was. Before they can finish talking, officials from the monitoring office arrive and close Matt's bank because what he did was illegal, but he didn't know. Moments later, the police arrive and arrest Matt, Joe, and Bernard. During the investigation, the officer advises Matt to tell the court that Joe and Bernard were the ones who did everything and involved him. He should say he was just following their orders because he wanted the money. This way, the charge will be proven against them, and he won't be imprisoned. Matt considers this and agrees to say it during the court hearing. Before his own hearing, the investigating officer advises Bernard to confess that he was wrong, that he accumulated his wealth through fraud and deception, and that white people supported and helped him to reach where he is. This would greatly increase the probability of the sentence being dropped. When his hearing comes, Bernard tells Eunice she was right when she warned him about buying the bank, and Joe was also right when he told him it would lead to big problems, but he insisted on buying it. Eunice tells him she always knew he was unique in his thinking compared to everyone else. She tells him not to regret anything he did and to look at the situation from another angle. Perhaps this happened so he could defend himself in front of everyone and shed light on the racism occurring between black and white people in Texas. Bernard considers her words. When he enters the hearing, he decides not to talk about the mistakes he made in the loans. He tells them he knows the hearing is being held because they believe it's unacceptable for two black men to own two banks, and that's the real reason they want to prosecute him. The judge tries to interrupt him, but Bernard is impassioned and continues talking about the racism they've been subjected to since birth. He tells them that if they had been allowed, as black citizens, to take a loan from the bank and start a small business, he wouldn't have been forced to do all this. Great chaos erupts in the courtroom, and the press photographs him. The judge is forced to end the session. Afterward, the court sentences Joe and Bernard to 3 years in prison for wasting bank funds, fraud, and forgery. They seize all their wealth and confiscate their properties. Out of the 177 buildings Bernard owned, only one remains, which he had put in his wife Eunice's name. 3 years later, they are released from prison, and Eunice welcomes them. Bernard tells her they will travel to the Bahamas. He tells her that before the verdict, Matt called him and said the Federal Bureau wanted him to testify against them, and if he didn't agree, they would imprison him for 40 years. He didn't know what to do. At that point, Bernard made a deal with him. He would agree, but on the condition that Matt do him a favor and buy him 2 houses there before the government seized his money. Bernard and Joe decide to move their lives to the Bahamas and start investing in real estate from scratch. After a while, they return to America, having managed to accumulate new wealth. We learn that after Bernard's testimony in court, the government issued the Fair Housing Act, which criminalizes the denial of the sale or rental of property to black people and mandates equality in housing. And here we reach the end of the movie. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Let us know what you think in the comments, and stay tuned for the next movies. Bye!